Hello,
Hello,
and welcome to the home series. My name's Andy.
and I'm Stuart.
Yes, and welcome. The purpose of this whole series is to tell the St. John's family a little bit of what's been happening behind the scenes. We want to give you guys the cheat sheet of all the Zoom calls that have happened, all the talks for hours and hours, all the prayer, and what our plan is coming out of lockdown. We want to be really honest and transparent, but before that we want to say sorry, because we should have been in touch before this, but times in COVID have been absolutely flipping mental, and we haven't known up from down. It's been really difficult to know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now, never mind 5 weeks from now. So please be with us in that. Me and my bearded colleague are going to lead us through this moment, the home series, in an attempt to draw together all the narratives. So this is week one, and it's week one of 3 things. So we encourage you guys, if you're a part of it, to listen to all 3 weeks, because it's quite important as in where we go from here. Many people have said, what sort of moment are we in, and what is the times like? But I believe the word for a moment and the word for St. John's is we are on an exodus. That great leaving of one paradigm from another, on the thought and on the hope that maybe some way, someday, that we could do it just a little bit better. So that Exodus word comes from the book of Exodus, and that's where we're catching up the story today with a guy called Moses. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Moses before, but he was an Israelite, and he was born in a place called Egypt. And although he was born low, he finds this miraculous story where he is saved from certain death at Pharaoh's hand, and actually somehow, by some means, he becomes second in command to the whole of Egypt. It's such a title and such a role. But he doesn't forget who he is. He's an Israelite through and through. And the Israelites are oppressed within the whole land of Egypt. And one day, Moses remembers who he is, and he takes liberation into his own hands, and he beats down an Egyptian while he is trying to apprehend an Israelite person. And then people catch wind of this, and he runs from the truth, and he runs to the middle of nowhere to a place called Midian. He marries a woman, and his father-in-law, he tends the father-in-law's sheep. And one day, while he is tending his father-in-law's sheep, something miraculous happens. A bush begins to burn out of nowhere.
The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out of that land into a good and spacious land.
So it's this incredibly disruptive act for Moses. He comes to terms with the terror and anguish that the situation that he finds himself in back home. And somehow in the middle of nowhere in Midian, the truth has caught up with him. And this disruptive act leads him to rethink the course of everything that he has done, and to take a new path back homewards to free the Israelite people. And isn't that what's happening at the moment in the world? All the great movements towards liberation, have you heard them? Through the Black Lives Matter movement, through what's happening in Hong Kong, through what's happening within our own society, as we look at the racial wrongs that have happened before and we try to address them. People are crying out to be liberated. And we can't say either that the plagues have not come. Now, I'm not saying Jesus or God sent the coronavirus, but the plagues are here amongst us. We have experienced a great estrangement for one another. And I wonder too where that leads us for our own congregation. A great disruption happens too, first with COVID, but then it makes us realize the truth that is already in our midst, the stuff that we've been running away from, the stuff that has been placed inside of us uniquely as a congregation that we haven't chosen.
One of the things that has become incredibly important to me is this concept of pursuing God's will together. It's not just me pursuing God's for myself. It's that God can actually speak to a group of leaders, and God can truly lead this church, not me or Keith or any of the elders. Our desire is for God to do that. And so we restructured some of the elders' meetings to actually give us space to hear from God, truly hear what God was saying. And in one of those meetings last year, God spoke. And it was just really clear at that moment that it was time for us to leave the academy. And it was time for us to move on. And so we want to be faithful to what we believe God has said.
So that might catch some of you guys by surprise with us saying that. So if you've choked on your piece of toast when we said that, I'm really sorry. But that's what the leaders discern together. And that process of discernment can sound quite weird and ethereal and smushy and stuff. But actually what's true about it is that there's been a thing that we can't protect the academy as the pinnacle of the Christian experience. We can't protect its functionality as in this is exactly the best way to do church. And there was of the last year or so, in a really practical sense, it just didn't meet all our needs in the same way as it once did. And I'm not saying that we have to split the loch in two. Thanks very much, Chris, for the special effects. But what I am saying is that we need to go on a journey as people to find out what home looks like.
So Andy has just talked there about a physical disruption, a disruption in the place that we will meet in. But there's more than just physical disruptions going on. There is also theological disruptions going on. And we as a leadership team have known for a long time that we need to be having conversations around sexuality. We need to be having conversations around gender, because these are the conversations that are happening in our society right now. And we need to grapple with these things, and we need to be honest about the fact that we don't have all the answers, but we need to go on a journey with it.
As a millennial, if we don't ask those questions and really try to seek to answer them and foster a space where allowed people to think for themselves, then we just won't have a church anymore. Do you know what I mean? Young people will just get cheesed off if they feel like they can't actually engage with the church on any sort of deeper level. If things feel like dogma, we can smell it. We actually need to create a culture where we allow people to think. And more than that, we need to actually go on a journey as people, because it's easy to get fall out about what we think and what we believe, but it's more difficult to do that on a journey together.
So we've been talking about a physical disruption. We've been talking about a theological disruption, but there's a third disruption, and it's a technology disruption. And it has just blown us away what online church has looked like since March. We were not expecting any of that. It's a complete disruption brought on by COVID. But as well as a disruption, it's been a huge opportunity, and we have been able to engage with people like we've never been able to engage with them before. And it's not just younger people who wouldn't come to church, it's also older people that haven't been able to come to church for years. And so we're really excited about this third disruption, and we're really excited about leaning into that further and to use that as a real missional tool to reach out into our community. And so from that perspective, we are tweaking Andy's job. We are changing the job that Andy has been doing from a full-time youth worker job to a job that incorporates this online world. And you know that Andy's been doing this so well since March for us, but we want to make that more of a permanent change for him. And that's something that we want to continue. We're going to be talking about that more as we talk about Bowness, but we don't see that online thing going away. Even when we start to gather back again, the online church and the online presence is going to be a fundamental way that we do church going forward.
Another part of the disruption is understanding how church at the Barony fits within the life that we have at St. John's Church. And then we know now, even more than ever, that we need to support it, that we need to rally resource around it. But more than that, we need to see ourselves as one of the same thing. Now, David's going to speak a little bit about that, of some of the changes coming out of lockdown that church at the Barony is going to experience.
It's been 2 years since we launched Church at the Barony here in the Barony Theatre in Bowness, and we have seen how a small church and how a church in a local community context can be really beneficial to people as we have come together as a family and supported one another. As we move out of lockdown, we are going to be working more closely with St John's in Linlithgow, and part of that is moving to having our services here at 11 a.m. on a Sunday. So one of the things about moving to 11 o'clock is we are asking you to make a decision about where you worship and who you worship with. It's really a question of where do you fit in your local church, or what family you want to be part of here. And that's a hard decision to make. Are you willing to give up the big thing, the home church, to come and worship and serve in part of a local, contextualised community church? I hope that you are. I hope that you catch some of that vision to grow together and to do life together in a more intimate and authentic way.
So we said quite a lot to you this morning, and we realised that, so we're going to give you a little recap, and some words are going to appear. So the first thing that we said is we believe that one day we should leave the academy, and that's an important thing, and we put that out there and hope that you don't choke on your toast. The second thing is around a theological disruption that is happening. We need to have hard conversations about what we believe. We need to make them inclusive, and we need to encourage people to think. Thirdly, what we're saying is we're going to have a greater online presence, that all the toys do not go back in the box, and church news will be staying for the foreseeable future, and how to share the message of the gospel and how to include people in church moving forward. And then finally, Bowness having a moment where it says, do you want to be part of this thing that we're doing at 11 a.m? Do you want to leave the mothership for the richness that you could find in a slightly smaller setting in your own locality?
So some of what we've said today might have made you feel a little restless. It might have potentially also made you feel a little bit upset. And I just want to say that that's okay. We understand that. The most important thing to understand or to grasp is that we're on an exodus. We're on a journey. We're leaving one thing and we're moving to something else.
Let's just pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you for the journey that you took Moses on. I thank you for the journey that we're on as a human race, as people, and the acts of movement, of liberation, of all the different things that are happening in the world. But also I thank you for the great movement that you have within this church. I thank you for St John's that has been here since the early 1800s and is now always propelled forward, progressive. It's always progressive amongst its peers, that you've woven into the DNA of the church a heart for Jesus, a heart for the kingdom, and a heart for nurture. And we just pray that you would propel us forward once again to a great hope, a great eschatological hope of our promised land. Lord Jesus, show us what that looks like, and let us be honest with one another in the process. Amen. Hello!
Hello!
Welcome to the home series. My name's Andy.
And I'm Stuart.
And welcome. The home series, we're in our second week, is a series that is brought about to help the St John's family understand all the conversations that have went on behind the scenes, all the endless Zoom calls, all the breakout rooms, to give you guys the cheat sheets on what has been going on. Now, last week we mentioned several things, several bombshells, as some people may have described them. So we're going to give you a recap of some of the things that we said. So the first thing that we said is that one day we will leave the academy. We put that out there as something that the elders held, and we want to say that to you, that one day we won't always meet in the academy. The second thing is that we've got a theological disruption that happens, that we need to start talking about the big issues and understand as a church what we believe. The third thing is to say that we're always going to have a greater online presence. Church news, like real news, is not going away, but it's going to stay for the foreseeable future. And the final thing is that church at the Barony has a moment where it moves to 11 a.m. So you get the opportunity to still very much be part of the St. John's family, but just at a different site in Bowness. And there's going to be lots of different cross-pollination that happens between those two particular sites. So today we go past, we cross the Red Sea, we move as people onwards past Cockleroy, and we head to Mount Sinai. And that's where we pick up the story today with Moses. Now, the Israelite people have been freed from their slavery, and now they are a nomadic people following God by faith in the middle of nowhere important. And they stumble across Sinai, the mountain of God. And Stuart's going to read out a large Bible today, our verse.
Large Bible. In the 3rd month after the Israelites left Egypt, on the very day they came to the desert of Sinai. After they set out from Rehidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the house of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites."
So we see here the Israelite people are meant to be a holy nation and a royal priesthood. The true trajectory of Sinai is that everybody is called, that everybody has a part to play in. But we see later on in the book of Deuteronomy that the people didn't in fact want to make that covenant with God. And in fact, they wanted to just send Moses up the hill because it was easier to do so.
"At that time I stood between the Lord and you to declare to you the word of the Lord, because you were afraid of the fire and did not go up the mountain."
And isn't that what we've done in preaching in Scotland? That everybody hasn't had an opportunity to speak to God, or we haven't heard the wealth that's in the room, but so more often than not, we've allowed one person to go up the mountain to God on our behalf and to speak to us the promises of God. In Scotland, we have quite a tradition of it. Somebody sits high, and we used to, in this hall, have high standing for the preacher. And the preacher would look over the masses and would tell them what they had heard from God as they went up the mountain by themselves. And in fact, if you go in most churches in Scotland now, in rural buildings, in old buildings, the preacher is high because the preach is king. But what we want to say today in 2020 is that the preach is no longer king, and that we need to go on a journey as people to change how we say the narrative about God, to change how we talk about him, and to allow people to go up the mountain of God together, to hear his voice and to talk to one another.
And as Andy has just said, if preach is not king, then where do we go from here? Where do we learn in this new world, in this new environment? And that's why we've been going on this journey with learning streams. This is the environment where we see that people can really learn scripture at a deeper level than they've ever been able to learn before. In fact, we have had feedback from people that have said that they've learned more on learning streams in the last 6 months than they have learned through preaching over a 2 or 3 year period. And so that's where we're going, that's what we're pushing into. And we have seen that with David McNinch
starting off with storylines. That was the first one. Then we grew to 2 the last time, and this time we have 3. And we have the opportunity as well to have external people help us that are more educated and more helpful in the specific areas that we're looking like. So I'm excited about having Dr. Stuart Weir come in to talk to us about Theology 101 at a deeper level than we've maybe been able to have in the past.
And with the Preach Isn't King anymore on a Sunday morning, then it actually allows you to go deeper throughout the rest of the week. And what we're saying now is that we're not theologically deep, or we're saying we're just going to do simple stuff. It's actually saying we're making a commitment to going deeper than ever before. That we're actually making a commitment to say, this is so important. People learning about the scripture, people learning about how to actually live out this life with God, that we're going to carve up time throughout the year, 3 different sections right now, where people can go on a journey with learning streams together. What we're saying is we don't want to do shallow church, but we want to do church deeper than we ever have before. But if you kill the preach on a Sunday morning, that is, make it significantly shorter, then you're able to actually bring more voices to the table, and you're also allowing more people to be in the room. Now, we've went on a journey as young people, and I've been the youth worker here for 6 years. And in 183, in a weeknight, we talk the hind legs off a horse. We go to town, we talk about scripture, we talk about issues relating to faith and life. The young people are alive. But when we come together on a Sunday morning in the academy, sometimes the crowd looks like a bulldog chewing a wasp. And sometimes it's really difficult for YF to happen in those spaces, sometimes even particularly because it happens in their own school. So within this movement of Sinai, what we're going to trial coming out of lockdown is what would it look like for the young people to actually participate in the service every week? What would it look like to have young people that are hosting, young people that are leading the worship, young people that were even having the opportunity to speak? And that's a new approach, but what we want to say is that if we limit what we do with the preach, we can make this thing accessible for those who are teens and up to go on a journey together on a Sunday morning.
We've already been on a journey with this all-age services. As many of you will know, it started back in the primary school last year, and it developed into a once-a-month opportunity for us to reimagine what church could look like. And Lorraine has obviously been a big part of this journey, and she's just going to talk a little bit about her learning and some of the successes around all-age services.
Well, it was a bit of a journey when we went to the primary school previous year, and the all-age team came together and decided to do something a wee bit different, that we would make one point in the service and take the families on a journey and get them all involved. So there was lots of things for children and young people and the grown-ups all to get involved with together, which is really important that we all worship together. So we reduced the time that people were talking, so we reduced it down to about 10 minutes. This made it more accessible for people and more families more able to make it through a service, and it just meant that the kids and young people could engage for that short burst of time. We found as a team that if we put things together and got people to participate, it was less of a spectator sport, and everybody was getting involved and engaged, and to watch this happening was just fantastic. It was amazing.
In Exodus 19 verse 6, God says, "You will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." And I think historically in our tradition we've been focused on being a holy nation. And what does it look like to be set apart? What does it look like to be set apart with our finances? What does it look like for us to be set apart for how we use our time and our resources? But interestingly here, God is calling us to be a kingdom of priests. Now, why would a nation need a kingdom of priests? Surely a nation would only need some priests. Well, the reason that it's a kingdom of priests is because it's a kingdom of priests for the world. The very purpose and reason that God set apart the children of Israel was to be priests to the nations. And we believe, like we've always believed, that God is calling us again to something new, and for us to really bring God's kingdom to Linlithgow and beyond.
And as part of that, thinking about having a go, we really thought really long and hard and prayed a lot into doing something that was quite radical because of the opportunity that COVID had presented. So loosely, if you see graph here, we were talking about dividing the church into 4 places, maybe across Linlithgow and Bo'ness, to allow small pockets of people to meet together first because of the opportunity that COVID presented us. So one site might have had 50 people, another site might have had 50 people, another site might have had 50 people, another site might have had 50 people. So the church would have been divided into 4 things because of COVID.
And I apologise for that, because I had several conversations, particularly in the Connect groups, about that. And that was all because of the opportunities that COVID gave us. The idea was that we would have a pilot scheme and see, well, what could this look like? Because we have no other opportunity right now. We are only able to meet in groups of up to 50. But that soon, Plan A went by the wayside, because we had no opportunity to rent anything in Linlithgow, and there was no opportunity to have this pilot scheme. So basically, Plan A became Plan B, and Plan B is absolutely to keep the whole of Linlithgow, the core of Linlithgow, together, but really to start to really look at what it could look like for St John's, not just to be in one site extra in Bo'ness, but also to look at different sites and several sites. And one of the big opportunities that we have is the change that's happened because of online services, and I'll let Andy explain that just now.
Why, thank you. So the online service offers us an opportunity to do church in our locality at the moment with either a bunch of Christians that live round about you, or to invite your neighbours round for bacon rolls. Now, what we're saying is the trajectory of St John's is very much we want to plant churches, and we don't want to create a mothership in Linlithgow, but we want to create a hub that sends out churches. And Bo'ness is just the first one, and I repeat that again, Bo'ness is just the first one. But what the online service does for us is it enables folk in their homes or in a community centre to watch a service which is happening. So you've already got a preach that's there, you've already got a church news that's there, and you've already got some worship or a feature which links you into a wider body of people. And I just wonder if we all went up the mountain together, what it would look like to do churches in little pockets where we can, all across West Lothian and Falkirk.
And for too long, what it has looked like is Christians trying to find their place in a church service. Christians trying to find themselves in an event of Sunday morning. And what we're saying is it's not about the event. It's about mission. It's about you finding your place in your geographical community. It's you finding your place in your workplace. It's you finding your voice there. And we want to give you tools to do that.
And also within this conversation about Sinai, it's not a conversation about our own particular denomination, but I truly do believe Liam Fraser coming to our community of Linlithgow is a game changer for what it could look like for Christians in the town to do stuff together. Let's just hear a little bit of word behind Liam and his heart that he has for future cooperation.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to St. Michael's. This church has stood for almost half a millennium now, and it was built at a time when there was only one united church in Scotland, with all of God's people in Linlithgow contributing to its construction. Now, we today might not choose to spend our resources on great buildings like this one, but it stands as a testament to what is possible when God's people work together. When we don't compete, but cooperate. When we don't hoard our resources, but share them for the mission of God. You at St. John's at the moment are working through your home series using the Exodus to think through the times that we're living in. And we at St. Michael's this very day are starting our own 2030 Vision series, looking at what we believe God is calling us to do in the coming decade. Both of our churches, then, are looking at the future. So why not look at the future together? We, as the Church of Jesus, are on a journey at the moment, journeying through COVID, church reform, and the changed spiritual context we find ourselves in, journeying to that new land, that promised land that's being prepared for us by God. We don't know yet what that promised land will look like. We don't know how long it will take to get there. But we can discern and we can find the way together, whether it's in Springfield, on the high street, or in other parts of the town. God doesn't just give a mission to one congregation or to one special select group of people. He gives a mission to all of his people. So as two churches in Linlithgow who are looking at the future, let's look to God and look at the future together.
So we've talked at you a lot today again, so we thought we'd give you a little reminder of some of the stuff that we have said. The first thing that we said is that we're going to be significantly shortening the preach moving forward on a Sunday morning to allow more people to interact with the services. The second thing to say is that because of that, because we've shortened the preach, now we're going to try the youth more fully participating in the life of the church on a Sunday morning. More than that, what we're also saying is that we are fanatical about church planting, and we see that as the vision and the trajectory to plant out different sites, and Bowness is only the first one. And also as well to say that the online services hold a unique opportunity for you guys right now to be able to do church with your friends and your family in your homes with bacon rolls or vegan alternatives. Today our journey takes us to Mount Sinai, where everybody is called. We are not just people, we are priesthood, and royalty is reserved for some, but actually God calls us all a holy nation, a royal priesthood. And that trajectory gives us an identity which pushes us on, which makes us different, which challenges us to do something with what we have.
I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Hello, welcome to the Home Series. My name is Andy, this is Stuart. Welcome. The purpose of the Home Series in its third episode is to communicate to the St. John's family some of the changes that have happened behind the scenes, all the conversations, all the endless Zoom calls, all the breakout rooms, to give you guys the cheat sheet and what has been happening. Now, we're in our third week, but we thought we would recap some of the stuff that we talked about last week. So the first thing that we said is that we would make the preach significantly shorter. And in doing so, we would bolster learning streams and make learning streams one of the main ways which we teach people, in a commitment to go deeper than we ever have before. Also, what we're saying, because we're doing that, we're able to get different people and different voices at the table. So we're going to make it more accessible for young people to be part of the service and part of the church, and also bolstering the voices of the young and the old, and people who just don't get that much airtime on a Sunday. More than that, what we're saying is that we want to plant churches, and we are fanatical about doing so. And then more than that is what we're saying is that online services give us a great opportunity now for us to be able to do church within our localities. So today, we are heading to the precipice of the Promised Land. We are just on the edge, and this is where we find Moses in our story today. So Stuart is going to read out of a slightly smaller Bible this week and expound the scriptures to us.
Slightly smaller Bible. Then Moses went up to Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab and climbed Pisgah Peak, which is across from Jericho. And the Lord showed him the whole land, from Gilead as far as Dan, all the land of Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah, extending to the Mediterranean Sea, the Negev, the Jordan Valley with Jericho, the city of palms, as far as Zoar. Then the Lord said to Moses, "This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when I said, I will give it to your descendants. I have now allowed you to see it with your own eyes, but you will not enter the land."
So Moses is on the precipice of all that he's about to encounter, and then God says to him, you can see it, you've taken the people this far, but it's not quite for you. And then within that same movement, Martin Luther King uses this Exodus narrative, and on the night before he's assassinated, says these words to the assembled masses. In fact, he puts himself very much in this story, that he has been to the mountaintop, and he has looked over and he has seen the Promised Land.
We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the Promised Land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the Promised Land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Martin's words look to this great home that he wants to find. In this series, the past 3 weeks, we have been looking at what that word means, home. And today we want to unpack that more fully as what we believe the word home means for this particular congregation, this time, and this moment.
I love the way that God gave us that word for this series, home. It's not just about a moving out and expanding in a kingdom sense. It's about finding home. It's about finding ourselves fully in the middle of what God has for this church. It's about finding a place, a physical place that we as a congregation in Linlithgow can name as home. And we're not the only ones that are on a journey towards home. The New Well, which I've been part of since its inception, is looking for a place to call home as well. And we're just going to ask Heather just now just to share a little bit about that journey.
Well, I guess for an awful lot of us, the plans we had in January and the reality that we're living with now are two very different things. And for the New Well, that's absolutely where we're at. In January, we were going full steam ahead, drawing up plans with an architect for a building just off the high street that we expected by now to be getting keys for. We thought the refurb would be done over the spring and summer, and we were really excited about getting into it and getting on and expanding the work of the new well. But unfortunately, as a direct consequence of COVID restrictions and limitations, that has not happened. We will not be able to use that building at all, and we're back to square one, looking for a home for the new well. And it's really been very disappointing, and it feels like a lot of the stuff that we'd moved forward on has had to stop abruptly. But it's not all bad news, thankfully. We've had some really exciting things that we've been able to move ahead with during lockdown, and perhaps lockdown has given us an opportunity to do things that we wouldn't have otherwise done. So we've been able to apply for grant funding, and we were successful in getting money from West Lothian Council, which has let us provide counselling for free for people, and we've been able to pay the counsellors sessional work so that they can provide extra counselling for people most in need of that. The CAP stuff as well, we had done a pilot for the money management course, and we were hoping to get that going kind of March, April time. Again, that was kind of kiboshed with the COVID stuff, but we have now started having conversations about developing CAP work and setting up a job club. So we will be able to, with the restrictions that are currently in place, we can use Union Road for education purposes. So that means we can run courses. So we're hoping very soon to get some CAP stuff up and running. We're actually looking for people who would like to train to run a job club for us under CAP. So if anybody would be interested in getting involved in running a job club, proper training and support will be given. So really, in summary, the main thing that we're looking for is a home, a place that we can be based, a place where we can be visible, hopefully on the high street. And there are various opportunities around at the moment, and we're starting preliminary chat with various people to see if there's something that would suit us. We want to be able to have a cafe, we want to have space for more counselling and all the other things that we're doing.
Now, there was a time, believe it or not, where Keith Shaw had hair. And in that particular moment when Keith Shaw had hair, he was part of a church planting team down in Yeovil. And he told me this week, and we're just going to hear the great clip now, of the excitement he had when he encouraged people to find a sense of home in church, but also to leave the mothership, to leave the bigger church that they had in Yeovil, to plant out smaller congregations with a team of people.
It's a really exciting period of my life. I think it was one of the first times that we ever remember as an eldership team hearing God together. We actually got a verse from Matthew 5 verse 14, a city on a hill can't be hidden. And yet we recognised as a church we were doing a very, very good job of hiding. And through that, as we began to pray and seek God, we hit upon the idea of planting out congregations. So we're very much going for a cell congregation celebration model. So we set about actually 3 young couples and an elderly couple who are actually younger than I am now, but they seemed really old to us at the time, to actually spend 6 months praying and preparing the ground. We went ahead and we planted, and we took our time out, but we started doing creative things. We prayer walked the area. We took worship out on the streets. We leafleted the houses. And we started with 50 people. That included children. In fact, everything that was breathing we counted. We started with 50 people. And within a year to 18 months, that 50 had grown to 120 people. It really was like an adventure for me. Suddenly, my Christianity wasn't theoretical anymore. It was real and alive. And there was a real buzz about the place. And actually, people, including our own kids, couldn't wait to get to church on a Sunday morning, and because you knew that something else was going to happen.
So in the first week we spoke to you about leaving the academy, something that was heard from the elders, and that we were just being honest with telling you that dialogue that had happened. But as also as well behind the scenes, one of the things that we've been talking about is, what would it be like for St John's to have its permanent home of its own? What if home for St John's Linlithgow looked like a place where everybody in Linlithgow could do church together? What would it look like for St John's to have a home that really is a home, a hub that resources the church plants, that also bolsters a commitment to Linlithgow, but also serves the community? What would it look like to have a one-stop salvation stop right in the heart of Linlithgow? And we believe that it's possible. And not only that we believe it is possible, there is individuals within the church family who believe that it is possible. And a small property team has begun to develop behind the scenes to look at what could it look like for St. John's to have a permanent home together. And they are Ricky Steedman, they are Heather Bagarney, they are Billy Fraser, they are Stephen Rogers, they are Amanda Campbell, they are me, and they are Stuart. And those people are having conversations right now at viable places that could host us, that we could find home.
I think the biggest thing for me and the biggest theological journey I have been on over the last 10 or 15 years is that church is not an event. Church is not something that we come to. Church is who we are. And so it doesn't make sense for us to have a space that is only available to us on a Sunday morning. We want to be church throughout the week to people. We want a community space where people can come and drink coffee with us. We want a place where we can be visible all throughout the week. That is what we long for. That is what home looks like for us.
Now, we're at a unique point here at St. John's. We are on the precipice of things that are unknown, that nobody knows what the world is looking like in 12 months' time. Nobody knows what the world looks like in 12 minutes' time. But we're excited about what the future holds. And there's this iconic moment within Scottish history where Robert the Bruce kills his adversary, the person who was his rival, John the Red Comyn, in Dunfermline Abbey. And then he gets his friend, the Bishop of Glasgow, to swear him in as king and to coronate him at Scone Palace. And it's only him and his wife and his pals that are there. And he turns to his wife and he says, "Be glad, for we are now king and queen over Scotland." And his wife turns to him and says, "We are king and queen as boys are made in summer games." In other words, you are king over nothing unless people follow. And the proof is in the pudding about this, right? The proof is in the pudding in the sense of, you might have heard before leaders say things that haven't come true and haven't happened. You also as well, when we talk about property or home or finding a sense of a permanent home in Linlithgow, that might raise up in you questions of the past. It might make you feel things about where things haven't worked well before. And it's the same true for church planting. And we've got an opportunity now to do something new. But it only works if you guys come with us.
Earlier on in the year, we went over our values in the AGM report, and these values were not something that were dreamed up. These were values that have been in the church for 200 years. These were values of being about the kingdom and seeing the kingdom of God expand in our community. The values were about nurturing each other in discipleship and discipling each other. And the third one was about pursuing Jesus and worshipping Jesus. And that is what we have always been about, and that is what we will always be about. And there's this brilliant verse in Exodus 33 where Moses comes to that point where he realizes that the most important thing of all of this is not the promised land. The most important thing is being in the presence of God. He says this: "If you don't personally go with us, don't make us leave this place. How will anyone know that you look favourably on me and on your people, if you don't go with us? For your presence among us sets your people and me apart from all other people on the earth." For Moses, he didn't get into the promised land in a physical sense. What higher promised land is there? It's not a physical space, it's a relationship.
and a permanent relationship with Jesus.
And as part of that, going there together, we want to make it easy as possible to do so. Now, we're in crazy times because of COVID, but one thing that we have released today is a little PDF notebook, a handbook of all the things that we've said, all the main points that we've said over the past 3 weeks. And as part of that too, we want to invite you as well to a vision and prayer night on September the 20th at 7 o'clock on Zoom, where we're going to be encouraging people to pray into the things that we've heard, to allow people to ask questions, to allow this thing to be tested, but also as well for people to just hear from God for themselves. We realise that we don't want to do something that's hegemonic, something that is top down, but we want to bring people with us, and we want to go on this journey together. Now, the most vital point that we would like to reclaim, and the biggest disruption of them all, and the biggest mountain that we could ever be led to, or the greatest eschatological hope of a promised land that we could ever find, is in this point here. I believe more than ever at this time with COVID that we must, as people, as a church, as a nation, reclaim the radical belief of the person of Jesus. Jesus in this homecoming meal, the Passover feast, where Jews remembered the stories of old, places himself at the center of it. And now we're going to make time at the very end of this talk to do communion together. Jesus at this Passover meal places himself in the very heart of it and says these words, "Do this in remembrance of me." Now, he's not there talking about just drinking and not just eating bread. But what could the "do this" really mean? See, immediately afterwards, Jesus goes to Golgotha and he sacrifices himself. He pours out himself. His body is broken. And I wonder if the "do this" that is required is the "do this" that is required in all of us. That we, like Jesus, must be poured out. That we, like Jesus, must be broken. That we, as people, must serve one another, must serve our communities, must bring about self-sacrificial love to these people. Now, I'm not saying today that we're going to do communion through a different context of thinking about sin, but I want, as we think about the remission of our sin too, let us think also, what could we do? How could we break ourselves? How could we pour out ourselves for the betterment of others, for his gospel and his kingdom? So on the night where Jesus was betrayed, he took the bread and he broke it. And he said, "This is my body broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me."
And in the same way, he said, "This is my blood poured out for you. Drink in remembrance of me."
thank you for this meal. I thank you we can remember you. Jesus, I thank you that this is all about you and it's all for you. God, I thank you for this home series. I thank you that we can start to talk about what you've got for us and we can start and go on a journey together. God, we realize that we're in an Exodus time at the moment. We're in a desert time. We're in unprecedented circumstances. But we look forward to the promised land. And we thank you that you are leading us. And above all, God, we want to be in your presence. And we want to seek after you. And we want to be known as a people who seek after you. So help us, God, as we look into the future. Help us as we reach out into our community and bring your kingdom. Help us as we nurture each other and disciple each other and look after each other. And help us, God, and show us how to be in your presence and how to worship you for your glory. Amen.
Martin Luther King, on the night before he died, says these words, "But it really don't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. And I might not get there with you, but what I want you to know is that tonight, we as a people will make it to the promised land. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, let us give all our journeys to God."